Welcome to the Townsend Institute podcast series, Tips, a show produced by the Townsend Institute at Concordia University, Irvine. This podcast provides tips into leadership, coaching, and counseling topics aimed at helping listeners grow in both their personal and professional lives. I'm Dr. John Townsend, psychologist, organizational consultant, and author of over 30 books, including the New York Times best-selling Boundaries series. I'm also the founder of the Townsend Institute, and I'm excited to introduce your podcast hosts, Townsend Institute Program Directors Dr. Ashlie Andrew and Dr. Gilbert Fugitt.
Listeners, you are in for a real treat today as Ashlie and I interviewed Dr. Nancy Nguyen, core faculty member in Concordia's counseling program. Nancy has a wealth of knowledge and experience in cross-cultural counseling practices, as well as adolescent counseling using techniques like video game therapy.
It's just amazing. So let's tune in and hear more about how Nancy uses her Vietnamese roots to help shape and improve the counseling experiences for those she serves. Let's get started. All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of the Townsend Institute podcast series. We are joined here today with our colleague, Dr. Nancy Nguyen, core faculty member here at the Townsend Institute. Welcome, Nancy.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Well, we are excited to have you here. You are still in your first year as a core faculty member here at Concordia Irvine.
Yeah.
How is it going?
It's great. I mean, I know I'm barely hitting, I think like the halfway, a little past the halfway mark, but it's just been such a good fit, I'd say. That's where it feels a lot longer than it actually has been, but it's been great.
We put you to work starting on day one.
You guys, I was thrown into the fire a lot, but it was great.
So kind of the Townsend Institute, it's almost like dog years, right? I mean, it's like, I've been here 2 months, but it feels like 8 years.
Yeah,
so there you go. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, even though it's your first year as a core faculty member in our programs, you obviously come to us with years of experience in counselor education, in your own clinical work. So tell our listeners, and us too, a little bit more about your background and what brought you here to Concordia.
Sure. So I'm an Orange County native. My parents, they immigrated here from Vietnam. So my father came here right when Saigon fell in 1975. And so he flew straight to Camp Pendleton and immediately was, hosted and sponsored. My mom, on the other hand, she came in the early 80s and more the second wave of Vietnamese immigrants and refugees because my grandfather was a famous general in the Republic Army that was helping the soldiers there. Oh, wow. And so when it fell, they traced back 3 generations. And so you're not allowed to really do anything if you were even related. Imagine my grandfather was like a general. So they limited anything that my mom was able to do. She was a lawyer at the time and she couldn't practice or do anything. So they ended up making that rough decision to escape. And, they weren't letting people leave. So you had to do it kind of illegally. So you paid like fisherman boats and you kind of showed up and based on trust. Hopefully the boat was there or not. So she tried like 5 or 6 times, and we can go in a whole nother ballpark with that because I have her talk and come to some of the schools that I've taught at to talk about her journey and the whole experience of doing that. But she ended up finally being able to get on a boat and then was on the ocean for about 12 days. There was pirates and engines were taken. People were, they ran out of food, water, stuff like that, but they just needed to get to land. And so finally she landed in Thailand. Then she got sponsored over to Singapore, stayed at the refugee camp till she could get sponsored. And so came to the United States. One of my great aunts is a nun here in Southern California. So she was able to sponsor my mom here. So she flew in John Wayne and then situated here. And my parents met here and then were blessed with me 2 years later after they met. And then I grew up here in Santa Ana first and then over to Costa Mesa. And, there's a huge Vietnamese community. It's largest outside of Vietnam here in Orange County, right? In the Westminster, Fountain Valley and Garden Grove area. So you can literally drive there, and be immersed in like Vietnamese American culture. So I was blessed to be able to be around that. And I just knew, I wanted to serve my community. But as I was working and studying about mental health so my father had severe PTSD because he was like a mayor in his country, some kind of mayor, and he worked with the troops too. It was a lot of guerrilla warfare. So he'd have like sleepless nights and colleagues like, being murdered in their sleep, stuff like that. And, so he never really recovered. And then my mom was still trying to get the rest of her family over here. So she was always working too. And she probably has her unresolved trauma too. And so I saw the impacts on my parents, and it did impact how they parented me. And just full disclosure, all they knew was like corporal punishment techniques and like kind of negative consequences and things like that. So that's all they knew, because that's all that was available that they knew at the time. And that had its ramifications on me and people of my generation who were second generation. So I promised myself that, I'd learn about this and I'd find a way to better, to just help. So I went and I did my undergrad and master's program at Cal State Fullerton in counseling. And then I went into community mental health and then realized there was these huge gaps in service in terms of the Vietnamese American, like things weren't translated. We call them EBPs, or evidence-based practices. They've been studied and they've been utilized as protocol, and it's really grounded in research. But a lot of these EBPs weren't being translated over to other languages. And so specifically for the Vietnamese American community. And then on top of that was the cultural adaptations that are needed.
Yeah.
So I was talking earlier, one of the EBPs that I was exposed to and loved, it's called parent-child interaction therapy. So you're literally, the counselor's in another room behind a one-way mirror. And then the parent and the child are in the other room. And it's very attachment-based in terms of facilitating attachment through play. So the child and their parent are in the other room, or caregiver, because I worked in community mental health. So it wasn't just parents. I'd had foster parents too that were coming in. But so we had the caregivers in the other room, and they have a bug in their ear, like a little headset, and we'd be coaching them on different ways to use play to establish attachment. But one of the things I was noticing was there needed to be adaptations for the Vietnamese community. For instance, like if you set out a food set, you need to put a pair of chopsticks into it, because that's what they are exposed to at home. Or, I was talking about labeled praises. So there's a technique in there that we coach parents on using. It's called labeled praises, to reinforce a positive, specific behavior or a target, concept. So one thing, it's like listening, being patient. But in Vietnamese culture, where play is seen as a leisurely activity, to kind of praise on these random concepts, they weren't into that. So what we really had to tailor was to look at, well, how can we make this more like an educational learning-based activity, where they were like more focused on the actual action, like, oh, I like that you picked the cup that fell on the ground, or something like that. The parents were more apt to do that versus like, oh, I like that you're patient. Or just like, you're supposed to be patient. Like, why am I praising you for that? So that's what those kind of modifications. And so we did that. I gathered a group of Vietnamese American clinicians, psychologists. We translated all the things together. I trained some on how to go about using that modality. And I'm all about prevention because, like I said at the beginning, if we can give the parents tools right off the bat, and PCIT, it's for the ages of like 3 to like 7. So it's for that younger age group. If we can give the parents those tools beforehand and give them options, we can prevent so many cases going into social services because, they're using corporal punishment. So we were able to actually run the data on it because I piloted it on, I think it was 12 families or so. And we ran the data because we do measures like pre-test, a mid-test, and then a post-test after, and to see the changes. And we found statistical significance in what we were doing. There was a clinical significance in what we were doing. It was effective the way it was modified. So things like that like kind of drive part of wanting to be culturally responsive in the way we deliver services. And the paradigm, I think, that's here now, I was talking with Dr. Nita Phillips because, me and her kind of share the same. It's almost like it's a lot of these EBPs are being built with a one size fits all cultural lens. Right. But then you have to backtrack and like modify it on the tail end. But if you can have it malleable on the onset so that it can be tailored and be culturally responsive and modified, how wonderful that would be to start off with that framework first. So that's been a lot of what I've been interested in researching and looking at, and just how to modify the existing practices that are there that have been found effective, but also how to shift that lens to being, again, culturally responsive and malleable in the first place.
Wow, that is so fascinating. What a background, a wealth of knowledge, and wow, how blessed we are to have you here with that background to bring to our students, to bring to our team, and to bring to our listeners. You referenced just a little bit here those examples of kind of play therapy and that being one of the niches and working with the younger population of children or caregivers. I know one of your other things too, and this is probably more of a 21st century kind of topic, but video game therapy.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So I'm a geeky gamer anyways.
What's your favorite game?
During the pandemic, Animal Crossing, like I was on it day and night just with my friends, my cousins, because I have a lot of cousins here too. And we just connect on there and like trade goods. And it was our way to connect, you know? But in the midst of that, I was figuring out ways and joined like an online community of how to use this. Because if we were feeling this way, imagine what our clients were feeling.
Absolutely.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where for certain folks that are dealing with certain disorders too, being on the spectrum or ADHD, these games can offer things that they might not be able to get in quote unquote their real world.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a tendency maybe to go towards this, especially when you're talking about demo and you're working with adolescents, a lot of them are into video games. So that's where you got to pivot and look at, especially during the pandemic, how to connect virtually and figure that out. So I got into this whole, how do we incorporate video games? I joined an online Facebook group, even connected with another fellow counselor educator. He's over in New York who wrote a textbook about it. And so we're establishing the legitimacy of it. Because a lot of parents get scared about video games. They're like, oh, they're spending too much time on it and they're not going outside and all this stuff. But, you know, if we can shift their perspective and go, well, what strengths? And that's where our counselor identity, it's up strengths building. So what strengths are there in the video games though, that draw your child or your teen to this? And how do we draw on that? A lot of in our online group is trying to just work on the shift in that framework, but also to establish legitimate protocols and treatment planning. And, you know, my colleague, Dr. Rob Rice, who I was talking to, what he did was use a narrative therapy approach. It's more like a storytelling. So the treatment plan turns into like, your goal is like to defeat this boss, right? And so the kiddo or the teen makes up this boss or draws from their favorite game. And then, you know, the rest of the treatment objectives are about developing like powers or tools or whatever that might be. You know, it's different games. You get powers, you get tools, or you get money, whatever that might be. So they do that according to what specific goals they might be and depending on what disorder they're dealing with. So it's kind of a neat framework to look at and using those kind of metaphors in treatment. And then, well, with the advent, you know, technology, you can connect through the internet. So in my sessions, I'm playing with them, I'm connecting with them, and we're talking, and we're able to. I don't have to be in the office with them necessarily, because on my private practice right now, I had to pivot to be strictly virtual, just because I have a 2.5-year-old. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to do a lot more work from home. I just have to. You know, it's been great in that it's opened up doors for being able to utilize these kind of ways and using technology to our advantage to connect.
You know, as you talk about connection, that's one of the C's in our 3C framework here,
That's
you know,
right.
connection, competence, character. And Adam Grant, he has a famous TED talk about languishing, about, you know, people and not depressed, but they just really couldn't move forward, and how video games really helped him actually connect with his family. And it sounds like you're doing that with your clients. Do you find too that because sometimes as they play video games, they kind of get mastery, right? They become very, very good at it. Does that help them get unstuck when they're struggling in other ways of life?
Yes. And that's where the metaphors and because say, for instance, like using those metaphors, like, what helped you when you kept, you know, you're trying to get to this level, but you kept dying again and you couldn't complete it? What helped you to keep trying again? Those kinds of questions. And they'll be like, well, you know, I just thought to myself, well, I can do this. Or I told myself, well, I tried this many times. I can do it again. Things like that to help shift and change their thinking. And so it's just, again, drawing on the client's strengths that already are intrinsically there. And another pivotal part of my work, because I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in California, so I use a lot of systems work. So yeah, I can sit with your kid or your teen in session, but the pivotal work I need to do is to work on the system. What I try to help is to help parents understand and utilize and kind of, in essence, kind of do what I do to some extent and connect with their kids and utilize that as a platform for them to connect with each other. And in a way, it's a different way of building attachment, right? Through being able to do like this this activity together, or even just understanding. I can't tell you how many times I've just walked parents through like Roblox and they're like, their kid's so excited. They're like, oh my God, like I got this and I bought this with my Robux and they're so excited with me. But I'm like, the pivotal part is for their parents to understand how much this means to them and for them to be included in this process. So a lot of my sessions is, okay, I'll develop rapport with the kiddo, but I always try to slant it over to, oh, but your mom and dad are going to join us, or grandma or whoever that is. And they're going to like, can we share with them too? What would you feel about that? And asking that, and then kind of letting front load parents, let them know too. Like, hey, this is kind of my intent with these sessions. Especially parents appreciate it because I can't tell you how many times they've gone, yeah, I went to this therapist and they just went into a room and then they came out. I didn't know what was going on, And now that I'm a parent myself, I'm like, yeah, I get it. Like you want to know what's going on in there. You want to be included. It's and so to work in an isolated piece like that, I don't think is effective. You need to build not only connection with your client, but to help them solidify their connections with their family and the system that they're in. So that's kind of the huge thing I kind of infuse when I'm teaching my students too, is how to look at it from a systems perspective and not in a vacuum.
When you think about the family system, there are so many people that can be involved, so many generations
That's right.
of things passed down, both the good and the not so good, that influence that system. And those can be really difficult things to try to break or to improve or to change. I'm sure it doesn't happen overnight. So I guess for our listeners out there, those that are, mental health counselors, those are working to be, or just those that want to improve their family system, what would be a piece of advice you would give to parents or caregivers out there, just like a first step to take to try to improve that family system or maybe change it?
The main point is to assess and understand the system first, though, that's already there, and to help those that are in there understand what part they play in it. That's the pivotal part. Because oftentimes, like, these parents come in or caregivers and they're like, okay, fix my kid. And I'm like, that's not how it works, and kind of helping them understand that there's a responsibility that each of you have and a part that you play in the bigger picture, and to help them understand how they play that part in it. And oftentimes there's pushback, there's resistance, but, that's in and of itself telling, right, of how much that pushback and resistance comes out in your family system. Right. And how much you're replaying with that with me as your counselor. So the main part is context and getting that, doing thorough assessment when you're first meeting a family.
So Nancy, you've been doing this for a while, right? And you pivoted and you've been counseling and all these things. And then you had your child, right? You had your daughter. And so how have you maybe rethought some of the aspects of counseling since you've had your daughter?
Yeah. All this time working with parents and caregivers, and I'm like, but it's so different when you have your own. It's like you're in it 24/7, and this little human being just came in and just took up so much of my life. And so it's kind of acknowledging, and I think I talked about this yesterday when we were doing our self-care talk, but how much acknowledging the season of my life and what I'm in right now, and that I have to modify. I used to see clients and families like full on 5 days a week. My max is 5 clients, but I'm like, I can't do that anymore. I need to have my reserves for my own daughter when I get home. So it's really having to set boundaries, but also be aware of where I'm at with my season of change. But she's a lot. There's a lot of no's and a lot of, I'm by myself. And I'm like, oh. And then you got to contain your own emotions. And I'm like, oh, it was easy coaching and helping someone else. But when it's you, I'm like, whew.
It sounds like she's got some great communication and leadership skills already developing.
Yeah, that's a great way to frame it. She's going to be a great leader.
She's developing separation, right? In the Townsend model. Developing her own. You've done a wonderful job, Nancy.
I love it. Thank you. I feel so affirmed right now.
Another piece, you've talked a little bit about it, obviously, the work that you continue to do in the Vietnamese community and just that importance of cultural responsiveness. What else can you leave our listeners with when it comes to really trying to immerse themselves, be kind of this light for other cultures that might not be as represented in their other fields? You were talking about what you've done in counseling to really bring some of these ideas and methodologies to a type of audience that wouldn't necessarily have gotten that information. What recommendations do you have for others that might even be in different types of organizations to expand their cultural responsiveness?
To really own up to what you've learned in whatever discipline that you are in, and how much that in some cultures is just not maybe concepts of that, or even a translation of that. That's where I was talking with some of the other faculty of some of these concepts don't even transfer or translate specifically over. You almost have to find like the closest translation possible, but also find, an interpreter that might know of you or some aspect of your field to translate it properly. So that's where I just say, kind of own up to your knowledge, and how can you come back and give that to maybe the community that you come from, or those communities that you feel you want to bring to light, because whatever aspect of underrepresentation or need might be there. But to really own up to that and bring that to the forefront.
That's great.
I love it, Nancy. So we've talked about a lot of different things in this podcast here for our listeners. I think we're going to take us so much away from it. But if you could give them one tip as we close this out, what would that be?
So I was talking about, apparently I turned into self-care guru, but,
it's not a bad guru to be.
No.
I'm not. Yeah. I'm like, okay, y'all think I'm the self-care guru. I'm great with that. But honestly, like, to bring it back, us in the helping professions, and we're serving other human beings, but we need to rejuvenate our own well too, and how to go about doing that. What does that look like for each of you in your respective fields, and how you want to model that maybe, or infuse that into what you do, just to the world a better place. Because, an important part in assessing where you're at, like I was kind of giving my seasons of life, but where you're at and how you modify your self-care and your self-care plan as the seasons in your life change, and the things that come in, and the resiliency and strength factors that you bring into the picture, that have gotten you this far, and how to keep building on those. So that's the main thing. And, my parents who were refugees, to come from nothing, and it kind of reminds me of Viktor Frankl and existentialism, but really looking at when you're stripped down to like the essence of your soul, what brings you meaning, what brings you purpose. And that's what will help overcome kind of all those other earthly needs that you might be thinking you should or shouldn't have. So that's where that purpose and meaning can drive and maybe rejuvenate your self-care and passion too. And I think that's what, my life's work's been about, because it's giving back to the community I came from. So that's what helps me push through all the tough times, but also remind myself I need to take care of myself so that I can keep working for my community.
Well said, Nancy. That was so great. Well, we thank you for all you continue to give back to your communities, but also now us here in the Townsend Institute as faculty and staff, and of course, all the students that you're influencing as well. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
All right. Now let's play some video games.
Yeah. Animal Crossing. It's on.
Let's hook up. Let's go visit each other's islands.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy.
Special thanks to Gadesa Labawa, CUI alumni, for the Tips Podcast music. If you enjoyed the Townsend Institute podcast series, head to our website, cui.edu/Townsend, to find out more about the certificates or bachelor's, master's, or doctoral degrees offered through Concordia University Irvine. With programs in organizational psychology, mental health counseling, executive coaching consulting, and organizational leadership, we have a variety of faith-based programs dedicated to helping you fulfill your academic and professional goals, all while further developing your competence and character. Again, that's cui.edu/Townsend.